"Mark," I began, leaning casually against a display of low-flow showerheads. "Purely out of intellectual curiosity, you understand? Imagine a hypothetical situation." Mark's eyes widened. "Hypothetical, Mr. Henderson?" He always called me Mr. Henderson, despite my repeated requests to use Tom. "Precisely. Let's say we receive, I don't know, irrefutable video evidence, crystal clear, of an individual, a repeat offender, shall we say, not only violating Stage 3 watering restrictions with almost artistic flair, but also engaging in the unauthorized appropriation of water from a neighbor's private, diligently maintained conservation measures, like a rain barrel, for instance." Mark's brow furrowed in thought. "Wow, hypothetically, sir, that's pretty brazen. We'd start with an official warning, naturally. Then the fines kick in. They escalate pretty sharply, especially for repeat offenses and theft. We could be looking at several hundred, even $1,000. My prize-winning agave blue glow, a magnificent specimen of stoic resilience that normally thrived on little more than sunshine and existential angst, was looking suspiciously moist. Not just dewy, mind you, as if kissed by a phantom morning mist in our Stage 3 drought-declared patch of the American Southwest, but genuinely, unequivocally damp around its usually arid, gravel-mulched base. It was the horticultural equivalent of finding a penguin in the Sahara, smoking a cigar. I knelt, the sharp scent of creosote from my other drought-happy bushes filling my nostrils, and touched a finger to the soil beneath the agave. Definitely damp. Too damp. My meticulously curated garden, a tapestry of silvers, blues, and rugged sculptural greens, was designed to laugh in the face of our region's chronic water scarcity. It was my personal and professional point of pride. A living testament to the fact that beauty didn't need to be guzzled. Across the street, Brenda Bumble's lawn, an almost offensively vibrant emerald carpet, shimmered under the already fierce morning sun. It looked less like a lawn and more like a cry for help from the local aquifer. A faint, almost invisible drag mark in the decomposed granite path near my side fence caught my eye. It led, rather pointedly, towards Brenda's property. My custom-built, 250-gallon rainwater harvesting tank, nestled discreetly behind a screen of feathery cassia, also seemed lighter. My mental calibration, honed by years of managing municipal water resources, screamed that at least 20 gallons were AWOL. "Brenda," I breathed, a slow, dangerous smile beginning to tug at the corners of my mouth. "You wouldn't. Not from my garden, not from the Assistant General Manager of Operations for the City Water and Power Department's garden." Okay, so she didn't know about the latter part. Yet. "Oh, Brenda, this isn't just water under the bridge. This is a potential municipal code violation with escalating fines and possible flow restriction. This," I straightened up, a glint in my eye, "could be profoundly educational. For you." The next few days became an exercise in covert surveillance that would have made a Cold War spy proud if that spy's primary target was a 50-something HOA chairperson with a penchant for illicit irrigation. Brenda, butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, Bumble was a creature of habit, and her habits, I soon discovered, were flagrantly illegal. Her sprinklers, programmed with the cunning of a rogue state's cyber warfare unit, would accidentally overspray onto her prize-winning and perpetually thirsty roses, the arc of their life-giving jets extending suspiciously far, sometimes even misting my side fence with a taunting coolness. She favored the pre-dawn hours, the witching hour of water waste, for her most egregious violations. Our neighborhood, Golden Valley Estates, had strict watering schedules, odd-numbered addresses on Wednesdays and Saturdays, even on Thursdays and Sundays, and never between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. Brenda, bless her even-numbered address, seemed to believe these were merely gentle suggestions, like a no running by the pool sign at a water park full of toddlers. Her history in the HOA was legendary. There was the Great Mailbox Uniformity Act of '23, which dictated that all mailboxes must be precisely Pantone Cool Gray 7C, angled at a perfect 17-degree tilt, and free of any whimsical or non-conformist accoutrements. My unassuming, perfectly functional black mailbox had earned me 3 violation notices. Then there was her attempt to ban garden gnomes that weren't verifiably of heritage European stock, a crusade that thankfully fizzled out when old Mrs. Periwinkle threatened to unleash her chihuahua, Pepito, a gnome-sized terror in his own right, on the next board meeting. Brenda's hypocrisy was as vast and deep as the underground aquifers she was so determined to drain. My wife, Susan, a pragmatic soul who found my simmering amusement more baffling than Brenda's blatant water theft, was all for direct action. "She's got those sprinklers going again, Tom," she'd sighed one Tuesday evening, peering through the blinds. We were odd-numbered. It was 9 p.m. "That's a trifecta of violations right there. Just call your office. Report her anonymously. File the paperwork. End of story." "And miss this golden opportunity for character development, Susan?" I'd replied, already envisioning the various ways this could play out. Brenda is a force of nature, albeit a deeply misguided one. This isn't just about a few stolen gallons. This is about civic responsibility, ecological ethics, and the pure, unadulterated joy of watching someone hoist themselves by their own petard. "Besides," I added, a conspiratorial wink in my voice, "I have a professional reputation to consider. Can't have the AGM of Water and Power getting his succulent siphoned, can I?" So the Brenda Surveillance Initiative was launched. My first act was to install a new security camera. Not just any camera, mind you. A discreet, solar-powered, high-resolution marvel disguised as a rather avant-garde birdhouse. It had a perfect view of my side yard, the rain barrel, and, crucially, the fence line separating my xeriscaped paradise from Brenda's verdant vice. For observing migratory bird patterns. "Of course," I'd told Susan, who just rolled her eyes and went back to her Sudoku. I also started keeping a meticulous log. Dates, times, Brenda's furtive movements, the almost imperceptible drop in my rain barrel levels after a night with no actual rain. I even cross-referenced it with the granular data from my own smart water meter. A perk of the job. Noting tiny, inexplicable spikes in usage that coincided with Brenda's nocturnal gardening activities. The evidence was trickling in, as it were. One afternoon at the City Water and Power Building, a sprawling complex of concrete and good intentions, I cornered Mark, a bright-eyed junior analyst in the conservation department. Mark was enthusiastic, a little green, and viewed me with a kind of reverent awe that I found both endearing and slightly alarming. "Mark," I began, leaning casually against a display of low-flow showerheads. "Purely out of intellectual curiosity, you understand. Imagine a hypothetical situation." Mark's eyes widened. "Hypothetical, Mr. Henderson?" He always called me Mr. Henderson, despite my repeated requests to use Tom. "Precisely. Let's say we receive, I don't know, irrefutable video evidence. Crystal clear. Of an individual, a repeat offender, shall we say, not only violating Stage 3 watering restrictions with almost artistic flair, but also engaging in the unauthorized appropriation of water from a neighbor's private, diligently maintained conservation measures, like a rain barrel, for instance." Mark's brow furrowed in thought. "Wow, hypothetically, sir, that's pretty brazen. We'd start with an official warning, naturally. Then the fines kick in. They escalate pretty sharply, especially for repeat offenses and theft. We could be looking at several hundred, even $1,000, and if the behavior persists, we have the option of installing a flow restrictor on their main line, cuts their water pressure down to a trickle. Very effective for encouraging compliance. He paused. If actual theft is proven, like from a neighbor's spigot or system, that could also involve law enforcement for property theft, on top of our departmental actions. Why, is this related to that city council inquiry about increasing penalties for hydro hijackers? Something like that, Mark, I said, patting him paternally on the shoulder. Just keeping my finger on the pulse of departmental policy. Fascinating stuff. Carry on saving the city. One hypothetical scenario at a time. Mark beamed. I went back to my office, a thoughtful smile playing on my lips. A flow restrictor. The irony was almost too perfect. The monthly Golden Valley Estates HOA meeting was, as usual, an exercise in barely controlled chaos, presided over by our long-suffering president, Bob, a retired accountant who seemed to age visibly with each passing agenda item. Brenda Bumble, naturally, was in her element. As chairperson of the Beautification and Aesthetic Harmony Committee, a committee of one, a fact she conveniently omitted, she held the floor for a solid 20 minutes, lamenting the sad, desiccated state of certain neighbors' yards, accompanied by a pointed, withering glare in my general direction. My carefully chosen collection of barrel cacti and desert marigolds apparently did not meet her standards of lush community appeal. Then, with a dramatic flourish that nearly knocked over the pitcher of lukewarm water on the folding table, she launched into a passionate, yet utterly hypocritical, appeal for community-wide efforts to conserve our precious water resources. She proposed a new subcommittee, the Water Ethics and Responsible Landscaping Task Force, or AWERT, as she'd already acronymized it, to be chaired by, you guessed it, Brenda Bumble. Its mandate? To educate and guide residents on proper drought landscaping. The fox wasn't just guarding the henhouse, it was proposing to redesign it with a water slide. It is incumbent upon us, as responsible members of this esteemed community, Brenda declared, her voice resonating with the fervor of a televangelist discovering a new, lucrative sin, to present a united front of verdant responsibility. We must all do our part to conserve, while still maintaining the aesthetic standards that make Golden Valley Estates the jewel it is, perhaps mandatory soil moisture testing before any outdoor watering is permitted by the WERT committee. Verdant responsibility? I muttered to Susan, who was gamely trying to look interested while scrolling through cat videos on her phone. Brenda, your lawn is so consistently overwatered, I think I saw a family of mallards considering it for their summer nesting grounds. And mandatory soil moisture testing? Brilliant. Let's start with your yard. I have a feeling the city's main pressure gauge would register a tremor. To further test the waters, so to speak, I decided to upgrade my rainwater harvesting system. My existing 250-gallon tank was efficient, but I'd found a rather handsome 350-gallon model, sleeker, with a charming little brass hand pump that looked like something out of a Beatrix Potter illustration. It was a legitimate upgrade for conservation, but I won't deny a small part of me was curious to see Brenda's reaction. She did not disappoint. I overheard her complaining loudly to poor George, her perpetually beleaguered husband, as I was innocently deadheading my lavender near our shared fence line. Such ostentatious water hoarding, George. That Henderson man with his cistern. He's practically daring the sky to rain. It's unnatural. The HOA needs to regulate the size of these private reservoirs. The installation of the new tank required professional help. I hired Manuel, a local landscaper renowned for his artistry with xeriscaping and his almost mystical understanding of rainwater catchment. Manuel was a quiet, sun-weathered man with hands like gnarled oak roots. He was halfway through connecting the downspout diverter when Brenda, armed with her ever-present clipboard and a look of profound suspicion, materialized. "Excuse me," she announced, her voice sharp enough to etch glass. "Is this particular edifice HOA approved? I don't recall seeing a submission for excessive water containment infrastructure to the Beautification Committee's exacting standards. And are those native plants you're installing around it? They look rather aggressively pointy, and, quite frankly, a bit drab for our community's color palette." Manuel, a man of few words, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a patient rumble. "These are drought-tolerant plants. They are designed by nature to survive with very little water. And this is a rain barrel. It collects rainwater when it falls. It's all very water-wise. Helps the city." I strolled over, a pleasant, neighborly smile plastered on my face. "Just doing my bit for Golden Valley's verdant responsibility, Brenda, as you so eloquently put it at the last meeting. Manuel here is a true artist. You should see his portfolio of award-winning water-wise gardens. Truly inspiring for us all as we navigate these challenging dry times." Brenda huffed, her nostrils flaring like an affronted bull. She made a series of furious scribbles on her clipboard. I imagined a detailed caricature of me being devoured by a giant, pointy agave, and then eyed the new rain barrel as if it had personally insulted her ancestors. "The volume seems excessive, Henderson, and the hand pump positively archaic. I shall be looking into the bylaws regarding antiquated pumping mechanisms." With that, she spun on her sensible heel and marched off, presumably to consult her leather-bound volume of HOA scripture. Manuel just shook his head and got back to work, a small smile playing on his lips. A few days later, my front doorbell chimed. Standing on my porch were Officers Krumitz and Diaz. Krumitz, older, with a mustache that seemed to have its own gravitational pull, looked weary. Diaz, younger, had that trying not to smirk look that cops get when they know they're on a pointless call. "Mr. Henderson," Krumitz began, his voice flat. "We received a call regarding suspicious nocturnal activity involving, and I quote, furtive movements around a large water receptacle and potential unauthorized siphoning." I raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "My rain barrel is leading a double life, officer? Engaging in illicit nighttime rendezvous? Do tell. I thought it was a rather upstanding, law-abiding citizen of the water-collecting community." Officer Diaz coughed, turning it into a throat-clearing sound. "The caller, sir, a Miss Brenda Bumble from across the street, reported seeing someone tampering with your rain barrel late last night. She expressed concerns about potential water contamination or unauthorized drainage operations affecting the neighborhood's water table." "Ah, Miss Bumble," I said, nodding sagely. "My most vigilant and imaginative neighbor. Officers, I can assure you, the only person likely to be tampering with my water resources around here is Miss Bumble herself, probably trying to figure out how to tap into my gray water system for her prize-winning petunias. But please, by all means, feel free to inspect my highly secure, entirely untampered with, and perfectly legal rain barrel. It's quite proud of its contribution to urban water conservation." They did a cursory check, their expressions conveying a profound lack of surprise at finding nothing amiss. They shared a look that communicated volumes about their opinion of Miss Bumble's late-night calls. As they left, Officer Krumitz paused. "Just so you know, sir," he said, his voice dropping slightly, "Miss Bumble also mentioned something about your aggressively pointy flora posing a hazard to low-flying birds. We've logged it." He didn't crack a smile, but his eyes twinkled. My birdhouse camera, as it happened, had captured excellent footage of Brenda in her fluffy pink bathrobe and unicorn slippers, peering intently at my rain barrel around 2 a.m., only to scurry away when Mr. Higgins's tabby cat, Patches, let out a blood-curdling yowl from atop my fence. The game, it seemed, was afoot, and Brenda was playing right into my hands. The real turning point came a week later. My birdhouse camera, bless its solar-powered high-definition heart, delivered the piece de resistance. In the inky blackness of pre-dawn, a shadowy figure emerged from Brenda's side gate. It was unmistakably her, clad in what appeared to be a camouflage print caftan. She crept across the strip of gravel separating our properties, uncoiled my neatly stored garden hose from its hanger by my spigot, a spigot I rarely used, preferring my carefully harvested rainwater, attached it with practiced ease, and then, with the audacity of a seasoned cat burglar, proceeded to drag it across to her own yard. For the next 15 minutes, she meticulously watered her bed of prize-winning, water-guzzling, eternal flame roses, even using my decorative brass watering wand with the artisanal spray nozzle. The footage was damningly clear, right down to the smug little smile on her face as she directed the purloined water onto her thirsty blooms. I watched the recording over my morning coffee. A slow burn of indignation mixed with a perverse sense of triumph. The sheer, unadulterated, brass-nozzled nerve, I murmured, saving the clip to a specially marked folder on my secure server. This isn't just theft, Brenda. This is an affront to Section 7, subsection D of the Municipal Water Code, unauthorized connection to or tampering with private water conveyance systems. Fines starting at $500 plus restitution. It was time, I decided, for a more official nudge. That morning at work, during the weekly operations strategy meeting, I casually floated an idea. "Team," I began, addressing my heads of departments, "I've been reviewing our public outreach materials for the current drought stage. I think we could be more targeted. For instance, what if we sent a specific mailer to areas with historically high per capita water usage, reminding them of the penalties for violations, particularly theft? Perhaps highlighting the new anonymous tip line and the increased deployment of our water conservation officers?" My suggestion was met with enthusiastic nods. My team was good. They were dedicated. They also knew that when their AGM floated an idea, it was usually a well-considered one. A week later, every mailbox in the 90,211 but actually in a desert zip code of Golden Valley Estates received a rather stark official-looking notice from City Water and Power. It was printed on recycled paper, of course, in a no-nonsense font. It detailed, in unflinching terms, the severity of the Stage 3 drought emergency, the escalating fine structure for water waste, and, in a newly bolded and underlined section, the severe penalties for unauthorized appropriation of water from neighboring properties or private conservation systems. It also prominently featured the number for the anonymous tip line and announced, "Due to recent reports, water conservation officers will be conducting increased, unannounced patrols in your neighborhood." I was pruning my drought-resistant sage near the fence line, enjoying the late afternoon sun, when I heard Brenda's voice, raised in indignant fury, drifting from her backyard. She was, as usual, haranguing her long-suffering husband, George. "The nerve of city utilities, George. The absolute, unmitigated gall. Threatening us like common criminals. Increased patrols. Have you ever heard such jackbooted thuggery over a little H2O? It's probably that Henderson man from across the street, with his smug little cactus garden and his rain barrels. He's probably the one reporting everyone for breathing too heavily on their begonias. I tell you, George, there's a conspiracy afoot." I smiled, snipping a spent bloom. The seeds of change, and perhaps a little well-deserved paranoia, were being sown. Brenda, however, was not one to be cowed by mere official notices or the threat of a water conservation officer hiding behind her prize-winning azaleas. If anything, the letter seemed to galvanize her. She decided, in her infinite wisdom, that the best defense was a good offense. A few days later, I received a thick, cream-colored envelope via certified mail. It was from the Golden Valley Estates Homeowners Association, formally summoning me to an emergency HOA tribunal hearing. The complaint, a multi-page epic of perceived slights and gross misinterpretations of bylaws, was pure, unadulterated Brenda. I was accused of, among other things, operation of an unapproved, oversized, and aesthetically jarring rainwater harvesting apparatus, potentially destabilizing the local water table. Also, creation of a hazardous and unwelcoming pedestrian environment through the deliberate cultivation of aggressively pointy and dangerously spiky flora. My personal favorite was potential harboring of undesirable vermin and insectoid populations within excessive and unkempt mulch beds. And the pièce de résistance, the charge that clearly pained her the most. Willful and flagrant disregard for established community aesthetic standards via the persistent promotion of arid, unappealing, and frankly depressing landscapes, thereby demonstrably lowering neighborhood property values and casting a pall over the otherwise vibrant visual tapestry of Golden Valley Estates. The tribunal was to be held in the community clubhouse, a stuffy, linoleum-floored room that usually smelled faintly of stale coffee and quiet desperation. Bob, the HOA president, looking even more harried than usual, presided. The rest of the board, Mrs. Kravitz from accounting, old Mr. Abernathy, who mostly slept through meetings, and Diane from 2 streets over, who always seemed to be knitting something aggressively yellow, sat at a folding table, looking deeply uncomfortable. Brenda, dressed in a power suit the color of dried blood, presented her case with the theatricality of a seasoned prosecutor. She had poster boards with grainy, blown-up photos of my rain barrel, circled in red marker. She had a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws, which she wielded like a weapon. She spoke of community standards, aesthetic harmony, and the sacred duty of the Beautification Committee to protect Golden Valley Estates from the creeping menace of, well, me and my cacti. When it was my turn, I kept it calm, factual, and just a little bit smug. I addressed each of Brenda's ludicrous accusations with polite precision. Regarding the rainwater harvesting system, I began, my voice even. It is, in fact, well within the city's encouraged capacity for residential properties, up to 2,500 gallons, as per Municipal Water Conservation Act. Chapter 4, subsection B. My system, at 350 gallons, is a model of modest efficiency. All materials and installation methods meet or exceed city codes for safety and water quality. I'd be happy to provide the board with the relevant engineering specifications and code references. Brenda scoffed from her seat. And what makes you such an authority on city ordinances and engineering specifications, Mr. Henderson? Been spending your evenings at the library again, memorizing pamphlets on plumbing? A small smile played on my lips. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The pivot upon which the entire absurd drama would turn. Something like that, Brenda, I said, my voice still quiet but now carrying a new weight that made even Mr. Abernathy open one eye. I do spend a fair amount of my time with city ordinances. In fact, I help write some of them, and I certainly oversee their enforcement. I paused, letting the silence stretch, enjoying the confused frowns on the board members' faces and the dawning flicker of unease in Brenda's eyes. You see, in my professional life, when I'm not tending to my aggressively pointy flora, I'm the Assistant General Manager of Operations for the City Water and Power Department, overseeing water resource management, conservation initiatives, and yes, enforcement of city water codes. Well, it's rather a significant part of the job description. The silence in the room was no longer just quiet. It was a vacuum. Brenda's jaw, which had been set in a pugnacious jut, slowly unhinged. Her power suit suddenly seemed a size too big, Bob, the HOA president, actually dropped his pen. Mrs. Kravitz's knitting needles stilled mid-clack. You what?" Brenda finally stammered, her voice a hoarse whisper. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a startled ghost in a bad suit. "Assistant General Manager," I reiterated pleasantly. "City Water and Power. It's on my business card, though I rarely hand them out at HOA meetings." I then turned to the small projector I'd quietly set up. "And speaking of enforcement and water codes," I said, clicking a remote, "I believe this footage might be of interest to the board. It pertains directly to the matter of water usage, conservation, and, let's call it unauthorized resource reallocation within Golden Valley Estates." On the wall, in crisp, undeniable high definition, appeared the pre-dawn footage from my birdhouse camera. Brenda Bumble, in her camouflage caftan, caught red-hosed, diligently watering her eternal flame roses with my water from my spigot, using my artisanal watering wand. The smug little smile on her face was particularly damning. I let the footage play for a full, excruciating minute, then followed it with a montage of her other nocturnal watering escapades, the siphoning from my old rain barrel, her furtive sprinkler adjustments. "And this, ladies and gentlemen of the board," I concluded, as the image of Brenda wrestling with my hose froze on the screen, "is what actual, prosecutable water theft and multiple violations of city ordinances and HOA bylaws look like. My official report to City Water and Power's Enforcement Division, complete with this footage and supporting documentation, is already filed. I expect they'll be in touch with Miss Bumble shortly regarding penalties, which I can assure you are substantial." The aftermath was swift and deeply satisfying. The HOA board, practically tripping over themselves to distance themselves from Brenda and any potential liability, dismissed her complaint against me with prejudice and immediately initiated their own proceedings against her for actions detrimental to the community and in flagrant violation of established regulations and municipal law. The very next morning, as I was enjoying my coffee and the triumphant green of my agave blue glow, a gleaming white City Water and Power truck, emblazoned with the official city seal, pulled up directly in front of Brenda Bumble's house. 2 uniformed water conservation officers emerged. One was Mark, looking very official and trying desperately not to make eye contact with me as I, coincidentally, stepped out to retrieve my newspaper. His supervisor, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Miss Albright, looked like she ate bylaws for breakfast. To add a delightful touch of gravitas, Officer Krumitz was also present, leaning against his patrol car, on a civil standby to prevent any breach of the peace. The ensuing conversation on Brenda's porch, while muffled, was clearly animated. Brenda gesticulated. Miss Albright pointed to official-looking documents on a clipboard. Mark, bless him, occasionally interjected with precise references to water codes. Eventually, a series of citations were issued: fines for illegal watering, fines for water theft, a stern warning about tampering with a neighbor's property, and the crowning glory, official notification that a flow restrictor would be installed on her main water line within 48 hours, reducing her household water pressure to what Miss Albright later described to me as a regretful dribble. Brenda's attempt to appeal to a higher authority was particularly memorable. "This is an outrage," she'd apparently shrieked at Miss Albright. "A conspiracy orchestrated by that Henderson man. He's abusing his power. I demand to speak to his superior immediately." Miss Albright, I was told, had fixed her with an icy stare. "Mr. Henderson is one of my superiors, ma'am, in the chain of command for operational oversight, and this action is fully authorized and documented at the highest levels of City Water and Power. Perhaps you'd be interested in one of our brochures on drought-tolerant landscaping options while we're here. We have some lovely examples featuring aggressively pointy flora, Word of Brenda the Water Bandit and her dramatic downfall spread through Golden Valley estates like tumbleweed in a Santa Ana wind. Neighbors who had previously cowered under her reign of aesthetic terror now openly shared their own Brenda horror stories. Her once perfect lawn, deprived of its illicit lifeblood and now subject to the humiliating trickle from the flow restrictor, began its inevitable, visible decline into a patchy, brownish-green monument to her folly. She was rarely seen outdoors, and when she was, it was usually to glare resentfully at my thriving, water-wise garden. My own garden naturally flourished. I even won a Golden Trowel Award from the Desert Horticultural Society for excellence in water-wise landscaping and outstanding community education in sustainable practices. The framed certificate now hangs proudly in my office at City Water and Power, right next to a printout of Brenda's official citation for water theft. Months later, after a rare and glorious desert downpour, I was out checking my now brimming rain barrels. Across the street, a transformed Brenda Bumble emerged from her house. Her lawn was now mostly gravel and a few forlorn-looking, drought-approved shrubs. She was carrying a small, almost comically tiny watering can, heading towards her front spigot, which I knew still produced that regretful dribble. She caught my eye. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old defiance. Then, it vanished, replaced by something akin to resignation. She gave a stiff, almost imperceptible nod, filled her tiny can with the meager offering from her tap, and retreated indoors. I took a deep breath of the clean, rain-washed air, a genuine smile on my face. A hummingbird, a tiny jewel of iridescence, darted in to sip nectar from a blooming scarlet penstemon in my garden. You know, I mused, watching it go, sometimes the best way to water the seeds of change is to simply let a Karen hang herself with her own garden hose, figuratively speaking, of course. I paused. Mostly. And then I went inside to draft a memo on a new city-wide initiative, Community Heroes in Xeriscaping. It was time to find some new role models for Golden Valley Estates.